if we compare the religious situation of Europe and the religious situation of Latin America, they are very different. You may remember when Pope John Paul II visited Santiago de Compostela back at the beginning of the year, no, maybe and still in the last decade of the last century, he mentioned that today half of the church prays in Spanish. Half of the church prays in Spanish. So that means if you take the 40 million Spanish people, all the rest who pray in Spanish live between Mexico and Cape Horn, no? In southern Chile or Argentina. So almost half of the church today lives in Latin America. And Latin America still very religious people. No? Unfortunately, there are inroads of Protestant infiltration into our country. But this was due mainly because of liberation theology. Liberation theology gave a bad understanding of the preferential option for the poor, understanding it in a political sense, and aligning the clergy, or great part of the clergy, with the communist parties and the revolutionaries, and even with the guerrilla warfare, like in Colombia or in Nicaragua. So what happened? The poor people, when live situation of distress, where they are searching for an answer for their problems and a consolation for their situation, they are looking for something spiritual. If you come and offer them it's just a political revolution as a solution, they will go away. And if a pastor comes and starts preaching with the Bible in the hand, they will lead the pastor. They will go to the pastor instead of the Catholic Church. A Brazilian pastor, a very high-ranking Brazilian pastor, once said in America, the Catholic Church made the preferential option for the poor, yet the poor made the preferential option for the evangelicals. That is our tragedy, but thanks to God and thanks to some measures taken by Pope John Paul II, and mainly the condemnation of liberation theology by Cardinal Ratzinger, now of Benedict XVI, in 1984, the Church realized that this was a mistake and went back to proper religious evangelization. But still, a lot of evil, a little bad is still going on. And for instance, now in December, there will be a huge gathering by liberation theologians in Porto Alegre, south of Brazil, to insist on promoting the social revolution, etc., etc. So the situation is mixed because the Latin American people are still very religious, but now they are divided among 3/4 Catholics and maybe a quarter Protestants. Well, some people pretend that the opposition of the currents led by liberation theology against their regimes were tantamount to the opposition of, let's say, Polish people against the authoritarian communist regime in Poland. No? That is not true. In the 60s, when liberation theology started and all these revolutionary ideologies infiltrated, we didn't have any, at the beginning at least of the 60s, any military regime in Latin America. The only military regime was Cuba, after the revolution in '58. And because communist planned to transform every single country into another Cuba, the population reacted, and then obviously some military took power, and but this was as a reaction against the communist offensive. But so the situations cannot be comparable. What these liberation theologians were attacking was the social, economic structures, traditional structures, and private property, and the hierarchy, the differences of social classes and socio-economical classes. So it's not really something that you can compare. It's not the same. Latin Americans, they are very religious, and they are not revolted people at all. So for instance, let's say in the case of Cuba, Fidel Castro, in order to take power, he had to hide that he was an atheist and a communist, and present himself with the rosary around his neck. And at the beginning, he presented himself as a Christian fighting against injustice. So after he switched and started promoting atheism. But as soon as he started promoting atheism, he received the opposition of the population, and he has to really counterattack and expropriate all the properties. And well, now when he realized that there would be a massive revolt if he continued, he then switched and started a policy of tolerance, particularly after the two liberation theologians, Fray Beto and Fray Leonardo Boff, went to Cuba and had discussions with him and presented him as a big hero. So he started tolerating more and more Catholics started going to the church. Now, what in fact until today there is a lot of Catholic practice in Cuba, but the laws because there was no almost catechism, there is a lot of superstition and a lot of old African pagan religions starting coming back. The same situation is in Venezuela, where the population is very, very Catholic. And then Chavez had, in the past, attacked the church, but now that he is sick, and he is trying to be re-elected, he recently went to the church, to the very famous shrine, and started crying, and asking our Lord to preserve his health so as he continue his revolution, etc. And now he started sort of dialogue with the Catholic Church. Now, the problem is, part of the clergy has been influenced by liberation theology and considered them, Castro and Chavez, as the real political, social solution. So they dialogue, and creates a very confusing situation for Catholics. And particularly the Archbishop of Havana is very much criticized, because when Pope Benedict XVI went to Cuba last time, there were 600 arrests before the visit, and some people went to a church to protest against the regime, and the cardinal sent the Cuban communist police to take these people out of the church and put them in jail. So now they are saying, well, he is really playing in the hands of the regime. And so that is a catastrophe for the Latin American church, the survival of these dinosaurs of liberation theology.